very happy to be here. As I speak, I ground my feet here on campus at Royal Roads University, the land of the Lekwungen and Cosapsan families and nation, also known as Esquimalt and Songhe. And it's with deep gratitude that I'm here on those indigenous lands where I can learn, play, work, and where the present, future, and the past all come together as we learn together here. And Hilary, I know you always have beautiful words here, so I'll pass it over to you.
Well, I just think it's time we all started to tell our own stories about our connection with the lands. Nancy. So, for me anyways, the minute I came across that crest when I first landed at Royal Roads, I just had that sense that there was something of this land that recognized me and I recognized it. And since that time, I've been building a relationship there. And I'm, always glad to learn from our wonderful Lekwungen families that are still in this area, and our elders in the Heron People's Circle, and all of the folks that gather here and keep teaching us about that kind of reciprocity that's so critical for flourishing, for life furthering, and especially right now to recognize the intelligence that land holds and water holds and sky holds, and to learn in that way. Books are fine and wonderful, and we love that. And we also want to read the world and be really connected at that level. So I'm always grateful that we are on these beautiful and unsurrendered lands, unceded lands. So that's important also to mention. But thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And I'll just do a few slides here and I'll pass it over to Hilary. And we have Bill with us, we have Rob with us. So great speakers, all people involved in that graduate certificate in sustainable community development. They will tell you more about the program today. We'll answer questions. And yeah, as people are teaching in that program, they're the best people to tell you about it and why it's so important, especially in those days and times. I think this is crucial in many of our workplaces. And so Hilary, you just met Associate Professor, Program Head here at Royal Roads University. We have Bill Dushenko, Adjunct Professor. We have Dr. Robert Newell, that is Assistant Professor and Canada Research Chair in Climate Change, Biodiversity, and Sustainability. And I'm Nancy Prévost-Maurice, Education Specialist, so I do a lot of student recruitment, and I'm here to help you today. And behind the scene, we have Carla from Enrolment Services, and she'll be posting links for you to follow up during the presentation, and we'll make sure to send you a recording and to share those links with you. So what's happening for us today? Quick agenda here. We get to know each other. So using the chat, please introduce yourself. I love what Hilary said. Maybe you can tell us a bit more about the indigenous land you're joining us from today, and maybe what you're doing, what you're currently doing, and where you want to go. If you're interested in that GC, maybe why. Just interact with us in the chat and we'll jump in. I'll do a brief overview of Royal Roads University. We'll talk about the program, we'll talk about admission, and we'll answer questions.
Nancy, I'm just going to add that we're actually going to interject part of that before we do program information. We're going to have a conversation with Dr. Dushenko and Dr. Newell about this program specifically. And I'll get to introducing these two a little bit later, just a little bit more of a fine point on their introductions, if I may.
Yeah, fantastic.
Okay, thank you.
I love it. Yeah, and I'll maybe bring back that slide to you right after my little images here. Yeah. So I like to talk about, I know that this program is fully online. We'll talk about it at Royal Roads. We have online, blended, and on-campus options for you all folks online. But I always like to give you a brief overview of the campus where we are now. So on the top left, at Hatley Castle, I was there this morning with some students. Beautiful location, built in 1908. Many films and movies were filmed there. On the top right, we have the Japanese garden. We have 565 acres of land, so a lot of places for you to come visit, come study around. The Esquimalt Lagoon, which is a bird sanctuary, is at the bottom left. So the full campus is facing the water. It's very peaceful. And we do online learning for 25 years. I think it's very important to remember that we're quite a new institution, just over 25 years, and we like to do things differently. And we want our students to think differently and do stuff differently. But really, the online learning is not something we had to pivot over the past years. It's something we have always been doing. So we're really good at it, and we're really proud of it. And would you like to talk about this one here?
Well, I mean, we'll get into this a little bit later on, but I think that how I introduced the traditional land acknowledgement is, there is such a power to the relationships that we build with place, to place making. And, part of this graduate certificate in, regenerative sustainable community development or sustainable community development, we're just going through a name change, is about knowing these places and knowing them in an intimate way, a kind of renewed understanding of the places that we live and work and raise our families and work in organizations and build communities. And, that all of that must be taken into consideration if we're to do this well. There's a real, it's a real systems approach. It's a real holistic approach that we take in this certificate. So it's very powerful. And for some, it just affirms what they already know and that they've wished their organizations could do or their communities could do. For others, it could be entering into some new territory and pun intended, and developing some of these skills that are necessary for the future that is arriving, the future we want to be prepared for. So anyways, yeah, I could go on, but I won't. Yeah. Do you want me to do this one, Nancy? Okay, so, this is an interesting slide. The world needs you. Well, I think the world needs all of us to be, to understand what it is that we're here to contribute, how we're to participate. And what that means in some ways is understanding your place, in the whole ecology, and what is it that you're here to do, and how can we help support you to create the conditions in your home places and your workplaces for some of these things to happen, as well as the confidence in you to do this work, the skills, and also the network, because when you're part of a group like this, you become part of a network across the country and across the world where you can rely on people to help you with some of your projects. We know there's better ways to live together, better ways to be together. And so we want to share some of that, of what we found, but we're also really keen to hear about your experiences, because you're adult learners, not empty vessels coming to be filled. You bring your own rich experiences, which forms part of the curriculum. It's kind of a co-creation in the making when we're doing live case studies. And if you'd like to be more involved in your region, in your organizations, in your cities, then this is a really great program to dive into. Especially if you're someone who's in a position to do some planning or some organizing at the city level or the regional level. And even if you're not, these are beautiful skills you can build that can be applied, can be transferred and applied across organizations and any work that you're doing. I see we got lots of people chiming in here in the chat. It's nice to see. We've got people from Ottawa, wonderful, Slocan Lake, rural Alberta, Germany, Ghana. Beautiful. Thanks, everyone. Should I advance, Nancy, or yeah, okay. Okay. So are we really going to program structure? Is that the next one? Okay, well, sure. So just a brief overview before we get into our conversation. The program used to have a blended component, but we've moved it now. There's something new. We've moved it to just all online. We found this in response to our participants who said, really love to come to Royal Roads for that middle course, but it's just untenable, to do three courses all online just seems to fit people's lifestyles. And so it doesn't, we haven't lost any of the the case study quality of doing something live in the middle, looking at a real true live case in a city, will be working within your own cities, your own backyards. So it'll be very applicable to where you live. And as Nancy said, we're not new to online learning. It's not all Zoom calls. We're pretty well heeled in this regard. And you've got some, I'm thinking of you, Bill, Dr. Dushenko, you have many years in on the online platform, and your creativity is most welcome in those spaces, because you, from all intents and purposes, from what I understand, your learning platforms and the way that you teach your courses are so well regarded. They're so rich and so engaging. So, this is a wonderful way to do these 3 courses. Okay, so here we're going to get into a bit of a conversation. I'm going to introduce the 2 of you a bit more, if I may, just because I can. So Rob, I'm going to go to you, Rob. And, I was thinking about this morning. I thought, how am I going to introduce my colleague, Dr. Newell? Well, I would say you're a visionary. I would. I know. Oh, no, don't say that. That's too much. Well, you envision. I see that you are someone who can visualize what cities can look like, what is possible. And in fact, you use visualization software. That's, there's no accident to that, because you are someone who is a kind of a visual person. You bring this beautiful idea and we enter into it as a class of what's possible. And then people start to build what's possible in your sessions. And I just find that to be remarkable and super creative. And, everyone has a voice, but everyone has, an idea and a vision and an image, and it can all join in. So tell me, Rob, why regenerative? Why are we using the term regenerative right now?
Yeah, sure. I guess it boils down to, what do we mean by regenerative? One of probably the biggest, or maybe the key takeaway or key point that I want to put forward, is that regeneration is really about trying to figure out how to put resilience back into systems. And this is you could look at this from multiple different perspectives. You can get sure there's diversity, healthy interactions, and ecosystems functioning. You could think about this in social systems and socio-ecological systems. But if I were to really kind of stress one aspect about this, it's not necessarily about restoring what was there before. It's about regenerating is really about trying to get back into a state of resilience, right? So, and where that distinction lies is that we're not necessarily going to take a city and then just clear it out and basically restore the ecosystem that was there presently. Instead, or before, instead, what we're looking at is, and how do we actually find ways to become a more resilient urban space that also interacts with the natural spaces in a way that we actually also don't necessarily have that sort of separation of urban and natural. We kind of look at this in terms of social ecological functioning. So it's something that is often talked about in ecosystems, where an ecosystem might go through a state of, if you allow me to do a little bit of adaptive cycle talk, an ecosystem might go through a state where it starts, it's new, it builds, it becomes a very mature system. It goes through a state of collapse, where that could be a mature forest having a forest fire that spreads across and then burns down the forest, and then you go into a state of renewal and reorganization. So that's an area where this opportunity of regeneration can be found. So rather than saying you're creating the exact same system before, you're creating something, a new system, but something that's also healthy, something that has that level of diversity, something that can be resilient to a lot of different exogenous shocks, both in the social and ecological realm and the interconnected social ecological realms. So bringing it to the course.
Fractaling, right? Fractaling. You're talking about fractaling.
Yeah.
Where something fractals. You could use systems language still. But it also, what you just said, Rob, and some people will be very familiar with the adaptive cycle, but I just can't say enough right now how important it is to know that collapse and dissolving and a back loop for a time is critical to systems regenerating, to systems reorganizing to new levels of identity and maturation. Whereas in our culture, we're often, oh my God, it's the end of days where something's collapsing. Whereas really, it's also part of a natural algorithm in a healthy system. And, that we could even use that in the psychological realm and say, sometimes we have a dark night of the soul, and that's important too, because that's important to us as we actually, regroup ourselves and come out of that into a new level of identity and maturation. Because I also know regenerative includes the feeling effect now, looking at not just what happens at the socioeconomical level or the ecological level, but also from the interiority of the human, like what's happening for us spiritually, emotionally, what are we dreaming of? What are we, what's our deepest imagination engaging in? Because that's also part of the regenerative story.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, well, the term that's often used in the adaptive cycle language for collapse is also release, right? You have a lot of these storage connections, the stored potential. And, initially, the folks at, Holling and Gunderston, when they initially came up with this model, they thought that was a stable system in that sort of conservation phase. But I found out, no, if you're stuck there, you're stuck in what's referred to as rigidity trap, right? So, people talk about the idea that we need transformative change, right? So what is transformative change? You could look at it in terms of releasing a lot of the stored ideas or the stored elements that were there, allowing for renewal and allowing for the system to be able to grow and reconnect and develop new relationships and turn into a healthy system as it is. Oh boy. Right?
I can see it now. The slogan for the GC is come and experience your release. Release all your pent-up energy and all your ideas in this beautiful way that you can start co-creating something. Thanks, Rob. I'm just going to shift over to Bill now and say, Bill, what's your take lately on regenerative? I know you've got lots of readings on it. You're covering it in your first course, but what could you say about it?
Well, I think, first of all, Hilary, you made a really good point about the importance of place and connection to place. And I think one of the reasons for this particular program, just to start off with, getting back to that question, why should you take this program? I think I think everybody recognizes a lot of the innovation we see for helping to address, some of our biggest sustainability challenges, things like biodiversity, the climate emergency, and even human health, welfare, and security, actually come from local communities and municipalities that are they're directly experiencing and living these impacts, right? And it's particularly true, I think, for Indigenous communities, which are particularly vulnerable to these effects. And so, taking in the idea of regenerative development and sustainability, I think what this certificate program really helps to do is to sort of explore and leverage these opportunities. And what we're really talking about is potential in communities. And that's an important element of when we're talking about regenerative development. What sources life in a community in that regard? It could be an asset. It could be a community group, for example. It could be all sorts of different elements that come into play. But it's usually something that potentially isn't maybe realized, or at this point in time, and it's in the community's development, it's actually diminishing life rather than sourcing and providing regenerative opportunities for life. And so the idea is, I think, taking what Rob said, is not only to build greater community resilience and vitality, but also to work and sort of co-evolve with natural systems of which we're connected. And Rob mentioned the idea of socio-ecological systems, rather than what we've done in the past, which is building and designing over them. We have some good examples out here in some of our Western communities in which they've done exactly that, not mentioning any names. And so
no need to.
I don't want to get in trouble. So the program, what it does is it gives you that opportunity to really be involved with, engage with communities, and helping them to sort of develop some of these regenerative initiatives where they can co-create sustainable futures. And I find the biggest excitement for students in the program comes from realizing the unique, I think, essence and regenerative potential that exists in communities. So as I mentioned earlier, those things that sort of source and give life rather than diminishing it, and then exploring these opportunities. And that can actually be quite musical and inspiring as well as empowering. And so when we talk about regenerative potential in class and students begin to understand what that means in terms of determining, well, what's the essence of a community? If a community is unique, it's got some essence. And so with that, it's got some sort of potential that maybe at the moment isn't being realized. And so when they begin to explore that in terms of using a systems perspective, what are the ways that we can realize that potential in that system and allow it to ripple out, if you will, into the larger system in which that community is out. And when that happens, that can be, as I mentioned, that can be quite magical and inspiring as well as empowering for students. And so what I think we're trying to do in the program in general is really give them that sort of reflective, I think what I'd say knowledge, skills, and confidence that they, as you know, you mentioned, Hilary, they can take back to drive regenerative design and sustainable change within their own communities. So,
also, as you're talking, I'm thinking of, and Amanda has just said this in the chat, when we're co-evolving, this is also radical collaboration. Like, this is like, we need everybody sitting at the table.
Exactly.
If there's someone whose motivation doesn't run the same as yours, we need to sit together. We need to hear each other. Because like you said, there's these hidden gems everywhere. There's this potential that hasn't been reached because we've gone in and overbuilt things and road things. And I think it's really important. Again, Amanda in the chat said these integrative systems that we start to bring, instead of call people out, we need to call them in. And this is the kind of work that we're doing. It's not easy, but nothing easy is really ever, to me, worth it. I think this kind of work is hard won. And it takes everybody. It's going to take everybody and how we're going to be together in that way. Oh, I love this. Okay, I'm moving on. And I think this probably we've started to touch on it, but for the people listening, you guys and I know the structure of this program really well. We know how it rolls, where it starts and where it goes to and how it ends. But maybe I'll go back to you if you don't mind, Bill, if you could just give us an overview of your first course, and then I'll hand it over to Rob and then back to you to just sort of speak about the different things that happen in this certificate, and then maybe how we see this as different from, say, any other certificate on community development. So back to you, Bill.
Yeah, sure. In the first course, the CMDV 500, what we look at is we sort of explore sustainability in terms of the concept itself, some of the core principles, some of the ways that sustainability is actually evolved. We're moving more into ideas around regenerative design and regenerative sustainability. And then also what we'll do is explore some of the many innovations that are happening globally, nationally, and on the ground, I think, in community and other communities. And the other thing that we stress in this course is the importance of systems thinking, and I sort of get you thinking about systems thinking, and then Rob will probably take that to the next level in his next course. But the idea is to support sort of inclusive and integrative decision making, where we're looking at really complex, wicked and messy. Quite often you hear that term used, of ecological, social, cultural, and economic issues. And the idea is to sort of help us advance sustainable thinking and tackling its challenges. But we also have to recognize, when we're talking from a systems perspective, is that we also have to recognize what we do at one scale may also influence other scales. And so it emphasizes that whole idea of, if you will, the rippling effects. And so that holistic thinking that goes along with that. And the other thing we'll do is we'll explore some of the different cutting edge tools that are currently being used to support social networking and collaborative decision making, and also assess, where are we in terms of sustainability and vitality at the community level. And then we'll also look at how local action in communities and cities to mitigate things like climate change, but also other environmental challenges, can actually reduce vulnerability to their impacts, but can also be, as I mentioned earlier, engines for innovation. So, and that's something that Rob will talk about in terms of co-benefits in supporting other objectives for sustainable development at different scales. And so that's kind of the first course in a nutshell in that regard. And so
when you were talking about the rippling, I was thinking of the interconnectedness, and I'm reminded of, and I'm going to get a poem in here, you guys, because I can. Francis Thompson, 1917, and this is badly paraphrased. Thou cannot pluck a wildflower without troubling a star. So the deep interconnectedness of everything, that what we do in this smaller scaled system can really make a world of difference. So over to you, Rob, about the middle course that you are running, the case studies, and then we'll hand it back to Bill.
Sure. Yeah, no, I want to kind of maybe frame this question as what really excites me about this course and what I think would hopefully excite the folks in the audience about this course. There's two major things that I think is worth highlighting. In this middle course, as we talked about, we're going to be looking at case studies and exploring a sustainability or series of sustainability issues using systems perspectives and understanding how certain issues link with other issues, using this knowledge to say, if we map out these sort of systems and look at it through this perspective, how can we approach this through a holistic and integrated strategy or policy or plan? How do we approach these issues? What's exciting about this is that it's not just you're going to learn about these things and then bring this home to your home community. We're going to start with your home community. You actually be able to, you can focus your case studies on the areas that you work with, your home community or a place that you have attachment to, a place that you work in. So you actually get to select the case community. And not only that, then you get to interact with your other classmates to be able to share learnings and share your case and be able to have a discussion about different ways of addressing these issues and moving forward. So these are the sort of things that we actually do in our actual research and work. We're shortcutting this idea of learn some of these skills and then after the course you can bring it to your home community. We're actually starting this way. We're starting this so that you can directly apply and get that work going and also learn from your classmates and have these we're going to have forum to be able to discuss these things, share ideas with other folks that have really great ideas and been working with researching in their home communities and have lessons to share. The other thing that, sorry, go ahead, Hilary.
I was just going to say, Abdullah had just said in the chat that, this is great, theory's great, but how to take it into action. And you just said that. We start with this action. We've got some of the theory and then we start with this action. So we actually don't have to, we're actually experimenting as we go. And it makes it fresh and new every single time because every case is different.
Yes.
I mean, that must be good for you guys too, right? Really?
Oh, yes. Yeah, actually, it's one of when people ask me how I find teaching online, it's one of the things that I really like about teaching online, that people are coming to the course, engaging with the course in different place contexts. And so we can actually understand how you can apply different tools, techniques, and thinking to sustainability issues while people are currently in those contexts, right? It's a little different when you gather everyone together and then you're sort of sitting in Victoria and thinking about the Victoria context and how this might apply to a place that you're not exactly in right now. But the online course, that's one of the advantages of it. And then the other part that excites me, point number 2, is that we get to play with a lot of different tools. So if you get anything out of this, is I'm going to show you a bunch of different software and applications. Over the last couple of years, when we're working in COVID, we've been doing a lot of online workshops, and we've been working with a lot of online tools to gauge people in sustainability and resilience issues, right? So these involve things around systems mapping, spatial mapping that people can do collaboratively online. Another one that I think is quite interesting and could be quite exciting is we actually have some really entry-level system dynamics tools. So it's things that you don't actually have to know anything about systems dynamics coming to this course, but you will be able to play with some of these tools. And then after getting a bit of exposure to all these different tools, you can figure out, cool, maybe I can bring some of these back to my my job and use them a little bit further. So it just gives you an idea of what's out there and the sort of things that you might be able to apply to your work in the future.
That sounds cool. I might have to just be a fly on the wall in that one. I would love to see some of those cool tools online. That would be great. I mean, yeah, that's what I mean about you being a visionary. It's like seeing these things. It's visualizing these things like that. That's really exciting to me too, because then you can also kind of work it like a sandbox. You can play around and see what may or may not work. I mean, that's beautiful. It's a little bit like makerspace to me. Okay, over to Bill. Here you go, Bill. You're the third course. So you're the capstone. Yeah.
So the third, as Hilary mentioned, the third course is really a capstone. And so what it is really the culmination and the synthesis of learning that you've done in the previous 2 courses. And so what we're bringing together that theory and practice in an interactive online environment that's really, if you will, designed to sort of mimic the kinds of creative interactions, discoveries that would typically be found in what I refer to as a social laboratory context to allow students to sort of iteratively and develop and complete their city project action plans that they started with Rob in the previous course. And so, first of all, what we'll do is introduce you to the collaborative approach, so talk about some of the important concepts and principles that are related to support a wider and inclusive team approach with space. And we'll be looking at things like some of the Indigenous approaches to conversations and collaboration in terms of talking circles and those sorts of things. And then what we'll do is talk about also another element in terms of being a change maker or change leader or change catalyst, or however you define yourself, is talking about what are some of the things that you need to do and think about to be able to empower organizational and civil society change capacity as part of a larger design process for sustainable development. So what you'll be introduced to is some of the theory on change leadership. Rob talked about transformative change or transformative change leadership, as well as some of the practical and collaborative approaches that you can be using for design approaches for transformative change. And then we'll also look at how to complement other important collaborative tools and approaches that we've explored in previous courses in the program. And then what you're going to be doing is taking the information that you've gathered for your city project action plan. What you're going to be doing is going back into your own communities and actually doing an online collaboratory with the community that you're working with. So what you're going to be doing, and some of that will be done in Rob's course as well, is identifying the key parties. As you know, as Hilary talked about, this process is very much collaboratory, and identifying some of the key parties that need to be part of that conversation in terms of discussing that. And what that opportunity will give you a chance to do is to actually build on the knowledge that you've already done in terms of your research, but actually going out to the community and getting different perspectives on things, and beginning to explore, what are some of the synergies and tipping points that you can use in your project to sort of advance it in that regard. And so typically what we've done in the past, I'm not sure how we'll do it this time around, but we'll probably do something along the lines of a city project summit at the end, which is almost like a thesis presentation, if you will, but you guys are going to do being a capstone in your obviously in your in this particular course, and to give you an opportunity to present your work to an audience in that regard. And the other interesting part is you're also going to be doing, it's going to be multimedia, because the other thing you're also going to be doing is a multimedia piece, a short video that you'll develop that speaks, in about 5 minutes, talks about the project, what the challenges are, the approaches that you use to do that, and also what your recommendations are coming out. And so obviously, the important part of this collaboratory type of process is this engagement with other individuals and other players in the community, but also the ability to sort of feed back, if you will, to the people that you've been talking to talk about, in terms of the synthesis that you've made in that regard. And so also to get an opportunity, have I captured some of the idea, because a part of this work is also being not only a researcher, but also a whole variety of different skills. One of the most important ones is listening in that regard, and feeding back what you have talked about to the community that you're working with to ensure that you've captured their ideas in that regard. And that gives you an opportunity to sort of refine your project and then submit it as sort of the final capstone piece to the course. So that's essentially it. So as I say, you're going to be bringing together all those different things that you've learned in previous parts of the course. Rob will be giving you some great opportunities to develop conceptual maps. Conceptual maps are really helpful, especially when you're sitting down and writing and trying to write and think holistically. Having a systems map that you've developed that captures that, even though you may not include that systems map in your actual project, it's sort of sitting beside you and gives you an opportunity, if you will, to write around that. So it's a wonderful way of organizing your ideas and thinking holistically in that regard, rather than what typically happens where you deal with a problem, you look at it from a linear perspective, right? Problem, solve it, on to next problem, but taking more of a holistic systems approach to recognize that sometimes it's focusing on the problem. You certainly want to deal with that problem, but sometimes looking at the whole system and looking at opportunities for changing the whole system, the way that the system operates. So changing it from maybe a vicious cycle that diminishes life, as I was talking earlier, to a virtuous cycle that actually gives life in that regard, there's an opportunity to sort of do that as part and parcel of this course. So
Yay.
I'm sort of rambling on.
So we got to move on, but I love it.
You get the idea.
But yeah, and I love that, videos can be made on your phone. So the 5-minute video is pretty straightforward, and everybody needs to know how to do that. And I also love this idea that, being able to turn something over many times. And we do that not just by turning it over and looking at a problem, but saying, even, is this a problem? Maybe this isn't the problem. But when we start to talk to many different stakeholders, so much more information is revealed. And those are those happy surprises that help us to learn. So,
sometimes, as you say, you're saying, Hilary, taking the holistic approach, and Rob can testify to this as well, is when you look at the system and begin to look at where the potential is in the system and address that, sometimes that problem takes care of itself. So rather than focusing on the problem, if you change the way the system's operating in that regard, depending on how you conceptualize it, so that system will take care of the problem on its own, right, so to speak.
I have to say, from the projects in the past, I was always enlightened when it was presentation time. Things I would never have thought of that were illuminated through these processes. So I'm so grateful for that. Now, Rob, in a brief statement, what do you see are most pressing issues that cities and citizens are facing right now? I mean, we all know we're in a climate emergency, but what are you seeing? What are some of these acupuncture points we might be able to address in a certificate like this?
Sure. I'll discuss this in, there's actually a question in the chat too from Abdullah, from what are the top areas that communities require sustainability and development. So, you can actually pose that question that way too. What are these areas that we need to look at in terms of trying to think through systems and look at sustainability in a holistic way? In our research, the research that I'm looking at around integrated planning, we'll have a framework that we use called the Climate Biodiversity Health Nexus. And the idea around this framework is, if you're planning and doing strategies, policies, programs in a variety of different planning areas, including food, water, transportation, energy, then you kind of need to think about some of the critical sustainability issues of the time. And without going into the literature, over and over again, it comes up that climate adaptation and mitigation are some of our most critical issues, and also biodiversity conservation. But then you could also bring in the health component too, which also brings in that sort of social aspect of the social ecological, thinking about what sort of things contribute to both physical and mental health, and perhaps spiritual health too, if you want to look at that dimension, right? And then you can apply this framing to a variety of different planning issues and look at strategies saying, what are the areas of co-benefits, what areas of tensions, if you were to do a certain food strategy within these critical domains that support us. Now, before I sort of seal this off too, one of the things that we are also looking at is, where does justice fit in there, right? Because you can actually look at these different areas of tensions, co-benefits, trade-offs, if you use that language too. But you also can ask that question, co-benefits and trade-offs for whom? So the other thing that we look at is, if you were to take a CBH framing, then how do you apply the social justice dimension to understand that it's not just all win-win? It could be win-win for some, and maybe win-lose for others. So that would be kind of how I describe that.
Yeah, I think justice is one of these things that, it may seem like it's implied, but it's absolutely not. And especially with any of the EDI work being done now, the, equity, diversity, and inclusion, justice has to be at the foreground of all of that. Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Rob. That's great. Maybe, Bill, do you mind if I go to the next slide, or is there something that you wanted to add to this one? Or
well, I did actually jot down a couple of projects that have been done in the past by students. I don't know if
that's great. Yeah.
Hearing about that, and it gives a diversity of the projects that are out there. One was, and I'll give you the titles: Rethinking Centennial Square, that's in Victoria, BC, Urban Design and Public Space Activation. And so what this project involved was providing a set of opportunities and recommendations for the city of Victoria for further action to reanimate this really important public gathering space and balance the need for additional programming. And by just bringing in very small design changes, so that idea of using interventions to sort of leverage things, so including things like additional seating areas and green spaces that would enable additional uses of this important sort of gathering place throughout the year. And of course, there's with that, recognizing that in that place beginning to source life and the potential that's in there, there's wonderful opportunities for other things that can come as a result of there.
Okay, I'm interjecting right there because I love that. And do you remember that when we were in those conversations and doing some maker work, some design work, that students came up with the thought that sidewalks have to be and walking spaces have to be wide enough for wheelchairs, baby carriages, and shopping carts, because everybody accesses that area. And so that's also looking at people who are homeless that are in that area that have their carts with them and making that space welcome. I mean, the city liked that so much that the mayor tried to find us a classroom in the new design of Centennial Square so we could do our schooling there and have these ideas spill out. Do you remember that?
That's
Anyway.
a great idea. And also engaging not only the citizens that use that space, but also that whole area is surrounded by government workers.
Right.
You know, bringing them into that mix as well, and some wonderful opportunities there.
How about another example? Just one more example.
Yeah, sure. Another one, and this, we're keeping in mind, some of these don't necessarily have to be physical assets in a community. Another good example I have here is engaging youth to be climate leaders in the city of Victoria through a youth engagement framework. And so in this one, what the student did was create a sort of a vision and engagement continuum rather, that was created to engage youth to be climate leaders, sort of led by the vision to sort of learn, inspire, design, and to champion climate change and climate change action. So again, this is something not a necessarily physical space, but actually a group, and not a defined group, but bringing, you know, the next generation together to, you know, who are particularly concerned about the climate change issues that we're facing, particularly in our communities, and bringing them together as sort of a think tank, so to speak, to inspire the future.
Thanks. Yeah. Oh, I mean, we could go on. This could be an
yeah, and I have a couple more, but I know we're pressed for time.
That's okay. No, we're doing well. So you guys have touched on this, but just maybe again, Rob, when you were saying, well, I know Bill had mentioned messy, wicked. I added complex. I guess that's in the messy. But critical, sustainable skills, what do you think students will be, you know, coming out of this with? What kind of skills can they expect to start to hone and develop and cultivate?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that we've talked a lot about systems thinking, and maybe just to address this question a little bit more as to why we're doing this. You know, there's two ways of looking at systems thinking and systems modeling and mapping. There's this sort of hard systems approach that engineers will often use that will have particular outcomes and solutions to it. What we're looking at is kind of the messier system, to understand that what you're actually doing is just getting a larger and holistic picture of how, if you act in a certain area, then you are going to experience certain outcomes, and some things that might be beneficial, some things that won't be. So that sort of understanding, that impression also hopefully can start sparking thinking about how these issues or these strategies, these things that you implement, it's always going to be dynamic, and it's going to be an ongoing challenge, right? There's no stopping point. There's no end solution. This is a very characteristic thing about messy, wicked, complex problems. So you understand the system, you understand where the leverage points are, you understand how to target policy programs and strategies, but also understand too that they will have ripple effects in other areas that will require other attention. And as you know, your community, social ecological systems evolve through time, then there's that time element too that you'll have to keep thinking in it with a long-term planning perspective, that this is not the end point of said strategy. We're just learning tools that we can apply and reapply for this, you know, perhaps maybe the term continual improvement might be a little too simplistic, more just be able to, you know, be in relationship with the dynamic of social ecological systems at multiple scales over time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Bill?
I think some of the more simpler ones that are extremely important. I think Rob did a good job of sort of talking about some of those, the higher level ones. Some of the basic ones are listening. Incredible, important skill. I think, you know, people don't, in our world that we live in, and there's a good examples that people don't listen enough. And so one of the important skills to learn, especially when you're doing collaboratories and bringing in people and listening to them ideas, is ability to listen. The other thing that's really important, obviously, is the element of leadership. And sometimes leadership doesn't mean being in a position of power necessarily, or a position of certainly it involves influence, but people can show leadership in all sorts of different capacities, I was mentioning earlier. So, as Hilary mentioned, being a change maker, being a change agent, or being a change catalyst for that matter, right? And so a lot of people don't immediately identify themselves as leaders, but they still are able to bring about change in their own way. So I think that's really important. The other one is also, which one you would think about, is when you're talking and listening to people, is powerful questions. And Hilary, you probably have taught a little bit about this as well in some of the courses that you've been, is the ability to ask those important open-ended questions that really give people an opportunity to sort of think and reflect in that regard. And I think that's another element that's extremely valuable when you're working in, with sustainability and regenerative design and communities. The other one, which sort of carries on from what Rob was talking with systems, is being able to see connections. That's another very important skill. Sort of being able to think out of the box and seeing connections that maybe weren't there previously.
Okay, right. So that's making the invisibles visible in some ways. And I'm going to jump in here and say, that we're interested in resiliency, within our communities. And I find that there's a resiliency that students come out with when they start to see these connections and what's possible. So, on the micro to the macro level, when you start to see your way through, if you can listen deeply and actually be changed by what you're learning, be changed by it. I see that as our own human resiliency coming into play here, because to be able to face into what's difficult, we don't get a lot of training in that. This is where we actually get to sit in it for a little while together and work through some of these things and start to find our way through. And that's, I think, how we also gain some, really positive skills and some compassion and kindness and a new kind of vitality that I think Rob was alluding to earlier, and our beautiful colleague Ann Dale, here's the segue, created this other hierarchy of needs when it comes to sustainable community development in her book, Community Vitality. And to think we could place things like kindness and compassion and connection and stories and love and reconciliation and peace at the top of our needs, that we would look at things like beauty and access to the natural world and co-evolving with the natural world, and design that is simple and elegant and beautiful and takes into concern our ancestry and culture and place, that people are actualized, that they have their own agency, a sense of their own agency, so then they can be in communion. That's that dynamic process that Rob was talking about, and being open to change. I mean, rather than clamping down and, what we've been taught, there's one right way, just to say, what is here? What can I listen for? What can I look for here? And then this beautiful connectivity that starts to put everything together into a more holistic view, and that we can see it too through some of the software and the cool tools. I think this is how we can meet some of these needs. I couldn't resist not putting this in. I just love this slide. And some of Anne's readings will comprise this course too. Okay, we're just going to have a quick few minutes here for a program overview. But before I do that, is there anything in the chat that we need to? Nancy, is there anything here that you?
I think Hilary, Diane was asking a question about if we talk about rural and urban communities during the course.
Well, yeah, Rob, do you want to go ahead with that?
Well, we do, yes. Now a lot of that's going to come through depending on where the students are coming from and where they focus their case studies, but that's part of the place-based approach. So we can get to dig into a lot of those issues, hopefully with a decent cross-section of different places. But the other the thing to note here is really the idea is to understand how sustainable development is not a one size fits all. So that's what we're trying to stress here. So we will definitely touch upon the different types of communities, different sizes, remoteness, and so forth in the lectures. And then the actual in-depth research and knowledge sharing, lessons learned sharing sort of thing will come through. Will it depend on like what the case studies are focused on.
Okay. Great, thank you. And then another question was, here we go. Will the course include live or recorded lectures? Well, both. It's both. Yeah, obviously. You know, it's asynchronistic, and you'll meet once in a while, and you'll meet in your teams, and and you'll have some recorded lectures, and you know, you'll also be live at times. So it's a bit of both and, which is wonderful, very rich. And we try to accommodate as many schedules as we can, because we know people are in different time zones. So we really try to work it out. So just a bit on the program overview. So 9 credits, 3 courses, they're all online. Here again, assigned readings, you know, your synchronous and asynchronous lectures, interactive discussions, individual and team assignments. You do the 3 online courses one at a time. They're all 10 weeks, and you take short breaks in between, but they're really laid out in a beautiful way so that you keep building upon the knowledge from the first to the second when you're doing your live cases to the end. This is a whole, complete, comprehensive, not just 3 courses stuck together. These really have been built with a kind of a crescendo in mind. You can transfer these 9 credits into the MA Interdisciplinary Studies MA, which is great. They'll take all 9 credits. The MA in Environmental Practice as well, the MEP, and you can transfer 3 credits into MBA, MSc, or MA in the Environment and Management degree, or MSc. And you can also transfer 3 credits into the MA Climate Action Leadership Program, and to the program that I'm the other program head of, the MA in Environmental Education and Communication program. So the learning itself is spectacular, and it also has laddering options if you want to carry on and do an MA. So the first, the courses, as we've already said, I'll just be really brief with this. Everybody does a 3-week online, you know, academic integrity course. It's non-credit. It goes with every program. The core principles of sustainable community development, that's Bill's first course that he talked about, where you really set the stage with systems and really, you know, good theory, and you know, start to really take a look at what we're going to be diving into, but it really prepares you, and you start to form as a group and shape yourselves and start to think about things. As you move into the applied community development case studies, the middle course with Rob and Bill, it's going to be something that you're doing live in your community, land-based, on the ground. So you're really going to get your chops up there and learn a lot. And then the last course is the collaboratory, where you start to take in some of these other purviews of the stakeholders around you, start to really workshop your ideas so that you refine them, and they are really presentable, really something you can take and start to offer to your community and live into, add into your work, etc. So those are the 3 courses in a row. And then this is the how to apply. And I guess this is over to you, Nance.
Thank you so much for that conversation and discussion between the 3 of you. It was very rich and insightful. I get a lot of questions and people interacting in the chat, and yeah, I'm looking at the time and I know people are busy, so thank you for staying with us. And just a few more slides on how to apply. So if you're interested by the program, the next intake, as you can see here, October 2023, and you can apply today. So very easy to apply at Railroads. You go on the website under the admission tab there. You have all the steps on how to apply. You can submit your application. We'll talk about it. But what I want to just mention here is that as of today, you can apply. You don't have to wait July 2023. You can just apply today and be in that next cohort, the full online, the new full online cohort for the program. And October is a beautiful date to start. I just feel that you go through the winter and then you have that connection with your community, with the cohort, and you do one course at a time. And standard admission. So at Railroads, what I really like is that we have standard admission, flexible admission. So the standard one is kind of the academic typical one. So you will come to us with a 4-year undergrad degree in a related field from a recognized post-secondary institution. I know someone was asking me if we take international students, of course. So international and domestic students are welcome. And we ask 3 years of relevant full-time work experience. And I know that sometimes people question what is a related field, what is relevant. So it's really what makes sense to the program. And I know Hilary will be able to jump in, but we have more details on the website. And it's really when you will submit your personal statement that you will let us know who you are and what you have achieved in your life that make you a good candidate for the program.
Yeah,
But
and Nancy, I'll just say that in that personal statement, if you can say, if your field that you've been in is not wholly related, it's that you've been working and this is what you want to do and this is where you want to go. It's really just connecting the dots for us to tell us why you and why now and why this kind of learning. And it's really helpful to spend some time on that personal statement.
This is so true. And this is why the cohort becomes so rich, because we have people from different backgrounds and experiences coming all together. So yes, please don't stop yourself being like, oh, I don't have that, because we really want to hear from you.
Well, it's not all city planners that get together for the graduate certificate.
Exactly. And then if you don't recognize yourself in the standard admission, then we will adjudicate your file under flexible admission. And this is not something you have to check, like if you want flexible or standard. That's really the admission advisor team that will review your file. And here we ask for 5 years of relevant full-time work experience, significant relevant experience as we just discussed, and we assess on case by case. So again, you can apply today, we'll review your file, and we will let you know if we have any additional question about it. And I like that we include here work and life experience, volunteering, let's not forget about it, community activities, practical experience, or related training.
Yeah.
And what we just discussed about those documents, and again, it's all on the website. So you can print screen the screen right now, but it's all on the website. So you do an online application for $131.39. Then you create your profile online and you can start submitting your documents, such as official transcripts. So all institution, post-secondary institution you attended in the past, we need those transcripts, a detailed resume where you will outline all the great work you have done in the past, personal statement, as we mentioned, you tell us who you are. If at some point in one of your other institutions something went wrong, you let us know why. So you're really explaining who you are. And we ask for 2 letters of reference. And most of the time it's one academic, one professional, but I think we can be flexible around it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you're not yet a student, but we hope you will join us. But as a prospect and an applicant, you can have access to those services. So I really emphasis on that, because financial resources, we know that going back to school or continuing your education is very important. So please connect with the financial team here, because they can let you know about internal and external loans and grants and all the support you can get. You have the website as well, and connect with Carla's team that is here at learn.more@railroads.ca. So you can really learn more about the program, maybe talk to a graduate from a past cohort, and they're really there to support you to make that good decision. And at the end, I think we just have here a big thank you for all of you. And we have the blog, the website from the School of Environment and Sustainability. And I'll make sure to share that link with you so you can kind of browse around and look at some of the posts over there.
So I just want to thank you, Nancy, for helping host, and Carla for working the back end, and Dr. Dushenko and Dr. Newell. It is always such a pleasure to be with you. The things I'm taking away today, again, I always learned something. I mean, not that these are new terms to me, but I have this renewed sense of hope when I hear things like, it almost feels like a poem, resilience, healthy interaction, place connection, release stored potential, always dynamic, transformative change makers. Like, I mean, that's kind of the whole feeling of today's conversation. And it just, that's where my radical hope lies. It lies with the ability of what we can do together. We need each other now. We need to learn together and sit together and listen to each other and find our way through. And there's so much here for people to dive into. I hope you'll come and join us. So any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, the program head. Nancy can give you my email, or to either of these fine gents. I'm sure they'd welcome your emails. Yep. So thanks everyone for joining us today. And I hope this has been helpful, and feel free to share this link with other people who you think might like to come to this graduate certificate. So thanks.